I stood in the glaring light of my son's grand foyer, holding a homemade pecan cake, while 50 guests stared at my stinging right cheek. The scent of cinnamon and expensive pine filled the air, mixing with the sharp silence that had just fallen over the room. I was 68, wearing a simple wool coat surrounded by women in designer dresses and men holding crystal champagne flutes. My daughter-in-law Chloe stood inches from me. Her chest heaved, her hand still raised perfectly in the air after delivering the slap. The diamond ring on her finger had caught my cheekbone, and I could feel a thin line of warmth tracing down my skin. Low-class trash doesn't belong here, Chloe shouted, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. I told you this was a catered formal event. You always ruin everything. I shifted my gaze to my son Mark. I had spent 30 years raising him after his father passed, working double shifts at the hospital to pay for his college. I waited for him to step forward to defend his mother, to show even a fraction of the character I thought I had built into him. Instead, Mark looked at his expensive Italian shoes, swirled his drink, and laughed. A short, nervous, dismissive chuckle. "Come on, Mom," he muttered. "You did kind of barge in with that old tinfoil pan." That laugh broke something inside me. Not my heart, but the invisible string of obligation I had carried for decades. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply reached up and wiped the drop of blood from my cheek with my thumb. I set the pecan cake down on the marble console table. Then I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. The guests watched, holding their breath, expecting a screaming match. They had no idea I was about to end my son's entire lifestyle with a few simple taps. I dialed the 24-hour customer service number on the back of my premium credit card. The phone rang twice before a representative answered. "Hi, this is Sylvia Harding." I kept my voice entirely steady, completely ignoring the 50 pairs of eyes burning into my back. "I need to cancel the 2 authorized user cards on my account immediately." "Yes," the ones issued to Mark and Chloe. Chloe's smug expression faltered for a fraction of a second. She took a step forward, her expensive heels clicking on the marble. "What are you doing? Are you calling a taxi?" "Good?" "Yes. Freeze them entirely." I continued into the receiver, turning my back on Chloe. "No, they are no longer authorized to make any charges. Thank you." I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my worn leather purse. For the last 4 years, I had paid for their groceries, their gas, and the endless emergency home repairs on this house. I knew for a fact that Chloe had used that exact card to secure the luxury catering company currently serving bacon-wrapped scallops in the dining room. The final payment was due at the end of the night. "You can let yourself out," Mark scoffed, trying to regain the attention of his wealthy friends. "We have real guests to entertain." "I'm leaving." I replied, my tone perfectly even. I looked directly into Mark's eyes until he had to look away. "Enjoy your evening." I walked out the heavy oak front doors and into the crisp December air. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. I climbed into my reliable 10-year-old sedan, started the engine, and turned the heater on. As I pulled out of their driveway, I saw the head caterer approaching Chloe with a digital payment tablet in his hand. The reality of their situation was about 30 seconds away from hitting them. I didn't stay to watch the humiliation unfold, but the sequence of events was entirely predictable. The caterer would swipe the card. It would decline. Chloe would hand him another card, Mark's personal debit card, which I knew had less than $200 on it because I had been transferring money into it every month just to keep their heads above water. I drove through the quiet, snow-dusted streets of the suburbs, feeling a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't grief. It was an overwhelming, sudden lightness. For years, I had tolerated Chloe's snide remarks about my clothes, my car, and my neighborhood. I had endured Mark's passive-aggressive demands for cash, always disguised as temporary loans. When I arrived at my modest 3-bedroom ranch house, the first thing I did was walk into the kitchen and open the junk drawer. I pulled out the spare keys. Mark had a copy of my house key. He frequently let himself in while I was out to raid my deep freezer or borrow my tools, usually leaving a mess behind. I grabbed my toolbox, stepped out onto the front porch, and unscrewed the deadbolt. I had a spare brand new lock set in the garage that I had meant to install months ago. By midnight on Christmas Eve, my front and back doors had entirely new locks. I made a cup of chamomile tea and sat at my kitchen table, opening my laptop. The credit card was just the beginning. If Mark thought my presence at his party was an embarrassment, I was going to ensure he never had to suffer the burden of my financial support again. I logged into my cellular provider's portal. It took 3 clicks to suspend the data lines for both of their brand new smartphones. I sipped my tea, watching the confirmation screen load. At 8:30 the next morning, the aggressive rattling of my front doorknob woke me. I pulled on my thick robe, tied it securely, and walked into the living room. Through the front window, I saw Mark aggressively jiggling his old key in the new deadbolt. His face was red, his breath pluming in the freezing morning air. I unlocked the door, but kept the heavy brass chain engaged. I opened it just a few inches. "What is wrong with your door?" Mark demanded, shoving his shoulder against the wood. "Open up, Mom. My key is broken." "Your key isn't broken, Mark." "The lock is new," I stated flatly. He blinked, confused by the boundary he had never encountered before. "Why would you change the lock?" "Whatever." "Let me in." Chloe is having a meltdown. The caterer threatened to take us to small claims court last night, and my phone says it has no service. You need to call the bank and fix whatever glitch happened with the card. He didn't ask how my face was. He didn't apologize for his wife striking me in front of 50 people. He was just annoyed that the ATM had shut off. "There is no glitch." I looked at him through the narrow gap. "I canceled the cards. I also removed you from my phone plan. You are 35 years old. It is time you pay your own bills." "Are you crazy?" He gripped the door frame. "We have a mortgage. We have 2 car payments. You can't just cut us off without warning." Chloe made it very clear, "I don't belong in your world." I replied, my voice devoid of anger. "I am simply respecting her wishes. I won't fund a life I am excluded from." I closed the door, gently sliding the deadbolt into place while he was still yelling on the porch. Mark pounded on the door for another 10 minutes before finally giving up and speeding away in his leased SUV. I walked into the spare bedroom. For 5 years, this room had been a storage unit for Mark and Chloe. It was filled with Chloe's out-of-season designer coats, Mark's old golf clubs, and boxes of expensive home decor they bought and discarded. I spent the entire afternoon packing everything into heavy-duty trash bags and cardboard boxes. I didn't damage anything, but I didn't fold it neatly either. I stacked the boxes in the garage, completely clearing the room by sunset. For the first time in years, the space was empty. I envisioned a reading room, maybe a place for my sewing machine. I felt a deep sense of ownership over my home returning to me. The next day, I drove to the local auto dealership. 3 years ago, I had co-signed the loan for Chloe's luxury sedan because her credit was terrible. The title, however, was in both our names, and I had the physical spare key. Since they hadn't made a payment on time in 6 months, I had been covering that too. I didn't need to hire anyone to deal with the car. I simply stopped paying for it. I called the finance company, updated the primary contact number to Mark's, and informed them that the vehicle was located at his address. Let them handle the collections. My phone remained blissfully quiet. Since they didn't have cell service and refused to use a landline, my days were uninterrupted. I spent the week gardening, reading, and sleeping better than I had in a decade. The anxiety of keeping them afloat had vanished, replaced by a quiet, solid peace. 2 weeks into January, I was picking up fresh produce at the local market when I heard the sharp click of heels behind me. I turned to see Chloe clutching her designer handbag, looking slightly more disheveled than usual. Her roots were showing, and the arrogant spark in her eyes had dimmed. "Sylvia," she stepped into the aisle, blocking my cart. "We need to talk." "Excuse me, Chloe. I need to reach the tomatoes." I gestured toward the display. She crossed her arms. "Mark is a wreck. The car finance company is calling his work, and we can't even use the internet at the house because you stopped paying the utility bill. This has gone far enough. I'm willing to forgive you for ruining our Christmas party if you just turn the accounts back on." I actually smiled. It was a genuine smile of absolute disbelief at her audacity. "You slapped me across the face in front of your friends." I kept my tone conversational, not raising my voice at all. "And you expect me to continue paying your internet bill? You provoked me," she hissed, glancing around to see if anyone was listening. "And we are family. You're supposed to help us." "I did help you. For years, I selected 2 firm tomatoes and placed them in my basket. But I am no longer your safety net. You and Mark are going to have to figure out how to live within your means." I pushed my cart past her. She grabbed the handle, her manicured nails digging into the plastic. "If you don't fix this, you will never step foot in our house again. You'll never see your future grandchildren." I looked down at her hands, then up to her desperate eyes. "I haven't been welcome in your house for years, Chloe. And I won't be manipulated by children that don't even exist yet. Let go of my cart." She let go, stepping back as if burned. I finished my shopping and drove home. When I pulled into my driveway, Mark was sitting on my front steps. He stood up quickly as I parked, walking toward my car, with a rehearsed look of exhaustion on his face. "Mom, please," he started before I even shut the car door. "Chloe is stressed. She isn't used to living on a tight budget. You're punishing both of us for one mistake." "Assault is not a mistake, Mark. It is a choice." I grabbed my groceries. "And your choice was to laugh." "I am not punishing you. I am simply removing myself from the equation." I unlocked the garage door and pressed the button to open the main bay. The stack of boxes and trash bags sat perfectly organized against the wall. "What is all this?" he asked, eyeing the bags. "This is your storage. All of Chloe's clothes, your golf clubs, the holiday decorations. It's all out of my spare room." I set my groceries on the workbench. "You need to load it into your car today. If it's not gone by tomorrow morning, I am calling a charity donation truck to pick it all up." "Mom, our house is totally cluttered right now. We don't have space for this," he protested, running a hand through his hair. "Then you should sell it. You might need the cash." I offered a practical solution, completely unbothered by his panic. I walked into the house and locked the door behind me, leaving him standing in the cold garage. Through the window, I watched him angrily throw the bags into his car, cursing under his breath. I didn't feel an ounce of guilt. I put my groceries away and started prepping dinner. By February, the reality of their financial incompetence had fully materialized. Without my constant cash infusions, the heavy weight of their lifestyle crushed them. I heard through a mutual family friend that Chloe's leased Mercedes had been quietly repossessed in the middle of the night. I didn't gloat. I simply continued living my life. I joined a morning walking group with a few retired nurses from my old hospital. I started taking a pottery class. My bank account, no longer bleeding hundreds of dollars a week to fund my son's ego, began to grow rapidly. I booked a 2-week cruise to Alaska for the upcoming summer, something I had dreamed of doing since my husband passed. One evening, the phone rang. It was Mark calling from his office line. "Mom," his voice was hollow, defeated. "We have to sell the house. We missed 3 mortgage payments. The bank is threatening foreclosure." He paused, clearly waiting for me to gasp, to offer to drain my retirement savings to rescue him one last time. "That sounds incredibly difficult," I replied, calmly adjusting the reading glasses on my nose. Selling before foreclosure is a smart financial move. It will save your credit. I don't want to sell, he yelled, the frustration finally boiling over. I want you to help us. Why are you doing this? I am doing nothing, Mark. Literally nothing. I leaned back in my armchair. You are experiencing the natural consequences of living beyond your income. I cannot fix this for you. Chloe is packing her bags. She says she can't live like this. His voice cracked. I am sorry your marriage is struggling, I said. And I meant it. If you need a place to stay for a few nights while you figure out an apartment, the couch is available. But I will not give you money. He hung up on me. Mark didn't come to sleep on my couch. His pride wouldn't allow it. A few weeks later, a for sale sign appeared on the lawn of the grand house I had once helped them secure. They sold it at a loss just to cover the debts they had accumulated. I didn't intervene. I didn't drive by the house to check on them. I maintained my absolute boundary. Word reached me that Chloe had moved back in with her parents in another state, humiliated that she was no longer part of the country club set. Mark rented a small one-bedroom apartment across town. The extravagant fake world they had built on my dime had collapsed completely. One afternoon, I was repotting some ferns on my back patio when I heard a car idle in the street. I glanced through the wooden gate and saw Mark's old college sedan, the one he drove before the luxury SUVs. He sat in the driver's seat just looking at my house. I didn't wave. I didn't rush out to comfort him. I simply kept my hands in the soil, patting the dirt around the roots of the fern. I watched him sit there for 5 minutes before he finally put the car in drive and pulled away. He needed to figure out who he was without my money and without Chloe's ambition whispering in his ear. Until he did that, any conversation between us would just be a repetition of the past. I wiped my hands on my apron, feeling the warm spring sun on my face. My home was quiet, secure, and entirely my own. The following Christmas, my house smelled of cinnamon and roasted turkey. But this time, the atmosphere was entirely different. I was hosting dinner for 4 of my closest friends from the hospital and my walking group. There were no crystal chandeliers or imported marble floors, just a warm fire in the hearth and genuine laughter echoing off the walls. I wore a comfortable sweater, and nobody criticized my neighborhood or the brand of wine I served. We sat around the dining table, clinking our standard glass goblets. To good health and great company. My friend Martha toasted, smiling warmly at me. To peace. I added, taking a sip of the red wine. I hadn't spoken to Mark in 10 months. I knew he was working steady hours at a logistics company and living quietly in his apartment. He was finally standing on his own 2 feet. Maybe in a few years, when he had learned the value of $1 and the meaning of respect, we could have a cup of coffee. But I wasn't waiting by the phone. When I cleared the plates that night, I looked out the kitchen window at the snow falling gently on my driveway. I thought about the slap that had shattered the illusion of my family a year ago. It was the most painful thing I had ever endured. But it was also the greatest gift I had ever received. It taught me that love shouldn't be an endless transaction, and respect is never something you can buy. I turned off the kitchen light, locked my heavy front door, and went to sleep, feeling lighter than I had in 30 years. Looking back, the biggest lesson I've learned isn't about revenge. It's about clarity. For decades, I confused love with endless sacrifice, thinking that if I just gave enough, I would eventually earn their respect. But respect cannot be bought. And establishing boundaries isn't an act of cruelty, it is an act of survival. Sometimes the most profound step you can take isn't a dramatic confrontation. It's simply closing your checkbook, locking your door, and quietly walking away from the disrespect. We cannot control how others treat us, but we absolutely control what we choose to fund and what we choose to tolerate. True peace doesn't come from fixing other people's lives. It comes from finally having the courage to reclaim your own.